Today we're here at Mercantile Center Station, and this is Brian with BB's Vlogs and Adventures. Today I got a story about engine number 20 and a couple of bonus stories to add on to the end. We got an adventure to run. I just wanted to take everybody to our local TRE that takes us from Dallas to Fort Worth to show y'all what the railroad system would look like today. Did it look like this back in the 1800s? I don't know. But I got some dates, I got some stories and history to conduct on this video. So come along, let's have a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Legislator under the new Texas Constitution extended the time for the construction of a railroad. But the new provision was that the road must be completed before the adjournment of the legislature. People in the area of Fort Worth were getting very excited at the new provision. They felt like they were going to have to take things in their own hands in order to get the road through to Fort Worth to meet that deadline. A proposal was made to the new company, the Tarrant County Construction Company, to be organized with the capital stock to be subscribed and additional land grants to be provided by citizens of Tarrant County. Business and excitement increased at Hayterville in Watson County. The railroad surveyors had camped on Hayter's place, and they had been consulting with him on the best place to locate the roadbed through the valley to the west and up through the higher roads on the way to Fort Worth. So logs from Hayter's land were used for the roadbed. A gentleman and his son named Matt Goodwin and his son Jesse Goodwin. See, Jesse was just big enough to set wedges for his father as he was splitting the rails for the proposed railroad. People were speculating whether the trestle built over the village creek, in which where I'm at, was high enough or strong enough to hold even during flood seasons. It's July 18th, 17th, something like that, I don't know. And it is not flood season, it's drought season. A small station was under construction and some lumber was set aside to build a waiting room later. Another man by the name of James Ditto Sr. decided to move his business in the new town site plotted out by the surveyors. He built this new store in the middle of the block on the west corner of Center Street. The site was no more than a bare, gently sloped hill. He was a half a block south of Main Street, which ran parallel to the tracks, and we're going to go there next. The names of these streets were left with a little imagination. They were North, East, West, and Border. So we had North, East, West, and Border Streets This last one bordered a small stream. There was considerable discussion on what to name the new town. Some favored Haterville, others wanted Johnson. The name of Johnson was applied, but the Postmaster General wrote that Johnson would not be acceptable since there was already a town named Johnson Station that was 3 miles from the south. The Reverend Mr. Hater, remember, whenever I say Mr. Hater, it's not Mr. Hater like he hates somebody or something. His name is spelled Hayter. Reverend Mr. Hater, he suggested that the town be named after Robert E. Lee's home, Arlington. This was submitted, and it was accepted. Mr. F.W. Lawrence made the post office boxes for the new location. Grading the rail bed and cutting of ties had been going on at an increased rate with time. There was a great deal of grading yet to be done on the old campground on Sycamore Creek at the foot of Fort Worth Bluff. The railroad was to be laid to the south of that campground. The excitement in the Arlington area was beginning to be at a fever pitch. It was said that work engine number 20 and a caboose would come together through the tracks the very next day. It was then stopped at a water tank on an East Prairie at Hater's place. Even though it was very early when old number 20 came through, people were lined up at a safe distance along the tracks at various places. There was much whistleblowing and near runaways from startled teams of horses. Children were excited and screaming when the whistle blew. Some of the young men would ride their horses beside the train from the water tank to as far as Village Creek. And here I am sitting in Fort Worth, where they would call the depot. It's a little rebuilt since 1876, but Engineer Kelly was determined to keep a steady pace and get here to Fort Worth. Captain B.B. Paddock, editor of the Fort Worth Democrat, was at Sycamore Creek, exactly where I'm at, sitting right here to witness the progress of the train up the wagon road. It proved to be so crooked and unstable that the train had to creep the last 3 miles. Some of the men said later that the rails were more than an inch apart as the train pulled over them. A huge cheering crowd had gathered at the terminal and was headed by a band and great cheers. When engine number 20 would leave from Sycamore Creek right here in Fort Worth and head east to Arlington, it said that the exact time of the arrival at the terminal in Arlington is located on the southeast corner of Main and Lancaster Street, where Frank Kent Cadillac is now, and it was clocked at 11:23 a.m. So right in this location that I'm at is supposedly the Arlington post for engine number 20, which is somewhere about right here. It should have been like right in front of the Frank Kent Cadillac. And then as you see, let me zoom in there. See, I'm thinking that probably, and I doubt that that would be the building. I don't know. I mean, but I do know that they said that right where this Frank Kent Cadillac place is where the Arlington post was. This is where you could board the train in Arlington and then go to where we were a little while ago, which was Fort Worth, Sycamore. That's where you could get off and on from Fort Worth to get to Arlington. I have a couple more stories I want to go through. Let me go ahead and prep and get ready for these. Okay, so I'm going to tell the story, and then I'm going to get out of the car for a moment because I want to show everybody something that proves that my story's correct. And then I want to drive down a street and actually show you what this story backs. So, a gambler lost over $1,000 in one night when the halls opened up. In Arlington, there were 5 saloons in one block of East Main Street. 1 or 2 of them were no more than a small, dingy room with a few shelves against the back wall of a plain, varnished bar counter. Whiskey, brandy, gin, and bitters were on the shelves. A wooden pail and dipper was handy if a chaser was needed. A pot-bellied stove, tables, and chairs were askew in the room. Often a fiddler who had come in for drinks would supply some music. Whenever a newcomer happened to come in, the regular customers usually could count on being set up by a stranger if he looked at all prosperous. Some of the townspeople thought that the gambling hall was more respectable than a saloon, but that it was also an evil, for many men and boys were fleeced of their earnings, having been degraded and even murdered. So what I wanted to actually show y'all is, I'm not going to turn off the camera here, I may make a cut or two, but look what's right behind me. This would be exactly what we're talking about here. We have what I think is the train track for this so-called train. You don't want to walk up and down these things, I'll tell you that, in the middle of summertime in July like this. There's all kinds of snakes, copperheads, and rattlers that like to hide in the rocks near train stations. But yeah, here's train tracks, and they're old. They go way down that end, and way down there. It only goes so far. Well, it may go further nowadays, but back then it didn't go as far as out to Dallas. So I wanted to show everybody this. Now next, I'm going to shut off the video, get back into the car, and what I want to do is drive by on Main Street here and show you what could have possibly been the 5 little gambling halls that they had. So as you see, this is East and Main Street. It looks like a very old building there. So one, it doesn't say that it's just on one side, but then this could be maybe a second. See, I don't know what this star would mean here, but 3. I would have to say 4. And look at this building, 5, or this one right here could have been 5. I don't know why that one looks a little too new. That one there though could have possibly been 5. I have no idea what could have been what. Just wanted to show everybody how all this kind of sinks into what I was into my story. And we're going to go off to our next part of our story. After the degrading and the murdering of so many people and kids with their earnings for gambling, the First Baptist Church of Arlington is the reason why it forced these saloons and even dance halls that were close to here to even close. The hack driver said that they were living on mud pudding and hope. In Arlington, the favorite picnic ground for which young people was the pasture across the branch, which was a boat of a large tank and plenty of trees for shade. A cotton gin was built on the site later, and the First Baptist Church of Arlington is here now. Arlington was beginning to grow rapidly, as many of the old-timers from Johnson Station had decided to move into town. Some of them were the type of people about whom Latin Stattenberry, editor of the Arlington Journal, many years later recalled in the following: "We were a paper caller on Sundays and brought the printer a jug of cider. When he came to town, who later on about hog killing time brought his friend ribs and backbone to last probably about a week. It is the same old-fashioned man who drinks salsa frosty in the spring to thin his blood, and who wears suspenders which he would call galluses, and which were knit from the wool grown on his back of his own sheep. He is the man who owned the long muzzle-loading rifle that had a hole bored in the stock to keep tallow to moisten the patches when he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and went out to roost turkeys. The same old-fashioned man gathered enough nuts every fall to make a wagon load, brought them to town, and exchanged them for his winter supplies. He pinned his weather prognostications to the goose bones and corn husks, and his faith therein was then justified. He weaned his calves and planted his potatoes according to the complexion of the moon, and he remembered Peter Cartwright, the sheriff, and most of his famous doings. He lived in a settlement, and as girls set up the kitchen with the young men shied around them, he carried his money in his weasel skin purse and paid $2 in advance for his country paper. He lived all over Texas, and his name was a legend, but he is gone, and little now is known either himself or his family. The brother-in-law of one of the young ladies from a farm south of town took his wife and young sister-in-law to Fort Worth while they were waiting for him to conduct his business. They decided to walk. According to the young lady, things were looking differently. They were in front of a nice-looking house, but they noticed half-clad girls lolling on the porch. Others were peering out of windows as they were looking for a postal delivery. While they were trying to figure out how to get back to the wagon yard, the sister wondered out loud, "I wonder where we are." She meant that she wondered that the street we're on. One of the girls on the porch heard her and she yelled out, "Hell, we're in the red light district. You better get back where you belong." So R.A. Randall purchased the J.H. Wheeler mill site from Archibald F. Leonard. Had built his mill first in 1857. It is located about 100 yards west of the Arlington-Bedford Road on the south bank of the Trinity River, which is where we are today. I mean, I guess we could be further up that way. I just decided to stop here. It'd be easier. Here Mr. Randall constructed a new mill, hereafter known as Randall Mill, and the road leading to his place became known as Randall Mill Road. This was certainly a time for building for Arlington. Many new homes were being constructed along the railroad on the choice lots. So finally, a man by the name of Colonel Frederick Forney Foscue, who owned a large parcel of land on W.P. Milby patent, signed over to trustees for the consideration of $1, a block of land on the corner of the Milby section for only school purposes. He asked that the parcel of land be called Pantego in memory of the Indian and his wife who had lived on the land and worked for him. Pantego and his wife were murdered by some Comanches who had come into the area and tried to persuade them to turn against the whites and go away with them. The two were buried on the land were two large oak trees on the west side of the small branch which runs through the Westbury Square shopping village. Brothers T.B. Bent Copeland and Horace Copeland and their families lived on their farms considerably northeast of the center of town in the Watson community. Look everyone, this has been one of the hardest following videos I understand. It's been one of the hardest videos that I've made. There has been a lot of things that I just could not find. For example, these two oak trees. And then I had trouble finding the Sycamore Creek. It's taken me about 3 or 4 days just to do this video. I'm still looking for 50 videos. That way I can go out to San Antonio, do a haunted video at the Crockett Hotel and give y'all information why I think Davy Crockett did not die at the Alamo. So please, if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to my channel, give a like to the video, share the content, feel free to leave a comment down below. Until we go on to the next journey. We'll see everyone later.